Hello, and thank you for joining me. I was reading the news this morning, and well, whenever I do that, I start to get a little anxious. I start to feel a heaviness too, just about the state of the world. What's going on today? What's the latest tragedy, or what seems to be the latest unsolvable problem that we as a species are dealing with? It's a lot. It's a lot. And you know, a lot of times you'll read something about a tragedy. It could be a natural disaster or an accident or something, and just start getting kind of caught up in the pain of people's experiences, whether it's something you're reading on the news or watching on the news, or it's someone you know personally. I mean, we live on this planet that is just filled with all sorts of horrors, really, from day to day. And so that that's reality, in that there is a lot of heaviness on the planet. There is a lot of tragedy and sadness that happens at the hands of humankind, and also, natural disasters. And of course, the news makes a lot of money churning that information out for all of us to consume. And this is not about bashing the news cycle per se, although I've done that in the past. But it's more about how it can be very easy, especially if you are an empath, or a person who just cares about the world, cares about people, to get really bogged down in all the bad news. And again, that could be world news, or it could be things that are happening in the lives of people that you care about. And what I'm here to talk about this week is the importance of really finding your joy. And that might seem, well, it might seem a bit shallow in the face of all that's happening in the world, or that might be how you might feel sometimes if someone says, you know, are you finding your joy, or what brings you joy in life? And for a lot of people who care deeply for people and the planet, it can seem frivolous to be thinking about seeking joy when there's so much work that needs to be done, and there's so many people that need help and support, and there's so many people suffering. How dare I put my time and energy into seeking joy? And joy could be anything, right? It could be spending time with family and friends, or it could be something more frivolous, like reading a gossip magazine, or uh, just shopping. But it doesn't really matter. The point is that seeking joy is actually good, for not just for you, like not just for your health and well-being, but also for the world. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about. Because I hear this often from people, that I'm very aware of others suffering. And again, this is a lot of times, this is empathic people who are saying this. I'm very aware of other people's suffering. I'm aware of my friends who are struggling. I'm aware of family members who are struggling. And there are these, this group of people over here who's suffering, and this group of people over here who's suffering. And it's a lot. So what happens if you're living in that feeling, in that energy most of the time? What happens if you're joining in with all the suffering? There, a lot of times it seems like, well, I'm in solidarity with people. I'm supporting them. But what's really happening is you're joining people in a really heavy, dark energy. And what's heavy and dark tends to sink to the bottom and creates weight. And what we desperately need is more people to tap into lighter energy, whether that's joy or love or peace, because those are the things that are actually going to help us evolve. Those are the things that are going to help us move forward in our evolution and actually find the solutions to the problems. There was a famous Einstein quote that I think is appropriate to this subject. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but problems are not solved at the level of thinking that created them. So when we're all in sadness and grief and suffering and struggle, we're in the problem. We're in the problem. And, when people are going through grief and suffering, right, and there doesn't seem to be a way out, for us to join in with them doesn't actually help them or us. It actually just creates more suffering. It just spreads the suffering around. So what's more important, and this is the really delicate balance piece, is if we can be compassionate witnesses to what's going on in the world without getting sucked under by it, without getting sucked under by hopelessness and futility and negativity and cynicism. What's most important is that we can be compassionate witnesses from a place of hope, that we can see people's suffering, but also understand that it's important for us to experience joy in life, and that joy itself is contagious. Joy and hope and lightness and lightheartedness and expansiveness, that those things are contagious too. Those things can help bring people up from their suffering, raise people up from the heaviness, from the darkness. And sometimes this is a very challenging thing to do, especially if you're tapping into all the tragedy and all the suffering and struggle. It can be hard to be the person who's hopeful. It can be hard to be the person who's joyful. A lot of times, when people talk about this and they say, well, what right do I have to be joyful when other people are suffering, especially if it's someone close to me? What right do I have to be joyful? Well, joy is your birthright. You have every right to be joyful. And it doesn't actually add to someone's suffering if you're joyful. In fact, it creates a greater space of joy in the world. And that's what we need more of. We need more joy. We need more love. We need more compassion. So your joy is actually helping others suffering. It's not taking away from them. It's actually creating a model for them. It's showing that there is happiness that can be had, that can be experienced, no matter what's happening. And I know, over the past year, there's been a lot of suffering and struggle and fear and loss. And so a lot of people have been really having a hard go of it. And so for those people who have been able to find joy, to remain buoyant amidst all the darkness and the heaviness, that has been helpful to all of us. We all need those lights to kind of help us get to the next place. And I'm sure you can think of people in your life who've been that light for you, who have been able to remain optimistic and hopeful no matter how dark things get. And the thing about that too is that, you might have experienced this yourself. Like sometimes when you're feeling really deep in grief or loss or whatever kind of suffering it is, it may be hard to find hope, even if you see someone modeling it. But that light is still there and it's still affecting you, even if you're not taking it in per se. It's still affecting you, and then as you start to feel better, come out of the darkness, whatever that is, then you tend to gravitate towards the light. And you've probably had that experience before. If you're in a dark place and there's someone who's trying to help you, and maybe you can't really accept the help, but over time, it becomes easier to accept the help. It becomes easier to want to move towards the light. And so that's what I'm saying for for anyone who struggles with that, I find this a lot, that a lot of people have a resistance to feeling joy. It's that, well, what right do I have to feel joy when other people are suffering? It's I don't want to feel too happy because there's so much darkness, and I'm sure that that's right around the corner. There are a lot of reasons for why people have resistance to joy, but the more joy you can accept into your life, the more joy you can experience, the greater that is for you, for your health, your mental health, your physical health, and the greater that is for those around you and for the world at large. There's a ripple effect to when we are able to generate positive energy for ourselves, and find a place of hope, because there's always hope. There's always hope. Sometimes if you look at the news, or you're looking around at all the horrible things that are happening in the world, it can seem like there is no hope, but there always is, and that's the fact. And so for all of us, the more time we spend doing things that bring us pure joy, the more we're helping those in our life, and the more we're helping the world evolve. So I bring this up because I feel like it is hard for people sometimes to really allow themselves to have joy, and I think it's so important. And no matter how frivolous that joy might be, it's not too shallow, it's not too frivolous. If it makes you feel good, then by all means enjoy it, as long as you're not hurting anyone, of course. But whatever it is that's bringing you joy, do that more. You don't need to suffer that much, right? We can all have easier lives. We can all enjoy our lives more. And again, joy is your birthright. When a baby comes into the world, you see the innate joy on the baby's face, just getting delight out of random things, looking around the room, or playing peekaboo, or whatever it is. It's innate, right? And we still have that. We live in a complicated world, and sometimes our thoughts can complicate those pure experiences, but we can still have those experiences, and they're extremely important. So that's really all for this week. It's just permission to have more joy. And again, it doesn't mean that you're abandoning anyone in their time of need. You can still be a support, and you can still be a compassionate witness, but you don't have to be taken under by all the heavy energy, the dark energy, the negative emotions. You can be grounded in your own joy and be a support for someone. So I hope that you are finding a lot of joy in your life this week, and I hope that you continue to remember that it's your birthright. You don't have to earn it. You were born with it. You can have as much as you want. All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week full of joy, and I will talk to you next week.